Welcome, dear traveler. Tonight we find ourselves beneath the silent expanse of the ancient Babylonian sky. A sky unlike our own, clearer, closer, untouched by cities, satellites, or rush, and yet somehow remarkably familiar. A world measured by stars. Long before modern telescopes reached for galaxies, long before time ticked by in electric pulses, there were those who watched the heavens with their eyes, their thoughts, and their hearts. In Mesopotamia, nestled between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, the people of Babylon raised their eyes to the stars. Theirs was a culture of careful attention, of clay tablets and reed pens, of the rhythm of water, wind, and light. To them, the stars were not merely faraway fires. They were guides, guardians, and at times divine voices. Each evening, as shadows stretched across ziggurats and the day gave way to velvet skies, priests would climb their observatories, called ziggurats, carrying with them not fear or ambition, but quiet reverence. They gazed into the heavens with patience, watching as stars traced the same paths night after night, paths they would record by hand, lovingly etched into soft clay. These tablets, many of which survive to this day, hold within them slow, gentle stories, stories of eclipses, times of sunrise, records of Venus fading and returning, simple facts, yet profound in their endurance. The sky was a mirror for them, not one of vanity, but one of divine rhythm. The ecliptic and the 18. Unlike the 12 constellations we know today in the modern Zodiac, Babylonian skywatchers recognized 18 constellations along the ecliptic, the band of the sky where the sun, moon, and planets move. These 18 were not defined by bright shapes or majestic mythologies. They were simple, modest, purposeful. Each constellation marked a portion of the sky through which the moon would pass. One of the earliest names among these stars was the Furrow, known today as Pisces. The furrow was linked to the goddess Shala, who sowed barley upon the earth, and so, when the furrow appeared in the night sky, it was not just a distant constellation, it was a reminder that the planting season had come. Each constellation was tied to life, sowing, harvesting, building, not heroes and dragons, but rivers and reeds, birds and boats. Some names were deeply poetic. The Crook, a celestial shepherd's staff, now part of Aries. The Great Twins, echoes of what would become Gemini. The Crayfish, a soft creature beneath Cancer's stars. Their myths, if they existed, have faded gently over millennia, and what remains are whispers, soft alignments between heaven and earth. 3. The Mul Apen, star calendar of the wise. Around the year 1000 BCE, a scholar of remarkable patience compiled 2 clay tablets now known as the Mul Apen. The name itself, Mul Apen, means the plow star, referring to the constellation Triangulum. But this wasn't a star map in the modern sense. It was a meditation, a long, slow listing of how the sky changed night after night, season after season, a guide not only to the stars, but to the timing of rain, of planting, of ritual, and of rest. The text is calming in its structure. It begins by noting the stars that rise just before dawn in different months, what we now call heliacal risings. It states, without haste, on the 4th month, the star of the lion rises. In the 5th month, the star of the scales. It notes when stars vanish, when they reappear, when a planet becomes retrograde. In the quiet halls of Babylonian temples, such knowledge was not just useful, it was sacred. There was no rush to prediction, only a desire to understand, and perhaps to harmonize with something far greater than themselves. 4. Divination, the calm science. While the word divination today evokes mystery and theatrics, in Babylon it was much quieter. The priests, known as Baru, did not see stars as fates, but as signs, subtle indicators of natural cycles. When a planet lingered longer in the west, when a star dimmed unexpectedly, when the moon turned copper in an eclipse. They recorded these things, not to inspire fear, but to prepare, to align harvests, to time offerings, to wait out the floods. A record might say, if the moon is seen with a halo, barley will be abundant. If Venus disappears in the east and appears in the west, the king's reign will be long. Soothing prophecies. Not thrilling, not terrifying, just quiet encouragement, like the stars themselves, always present, yet always changing. 5. Temples under moonlight. In the still hours of the night, long after marketplaces emptied and torches dimmed, the astronomer priests of Babylon would ascend their ziggurats again. Up narrow steps they climbed, carrying scrolls, charts, or simply their thoughts. Atop those towering temples, with only the sky above and the quiet city below, they looked not for visions, but for confirmation. There, in the hush of midnight, they waited for the soft arc of Jupiter to clear the horizon, for the crescent moon to lean gently toward the west, for Mars to glow like a dying ember. They sat in robes heavy with incense, scribbling calmly into wax tablets, whispering among themselves. The air was cool, the silence full. These were not men of conquest or spectacle. They were caretakers of time, and in their hands the heavens moved not in haste, but in harmony. 6. The legacy in dust and stone. Many centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. The names of the Babylonian gods faded. The temples crumbled, the languages forgotten. And yet, their sky remained. The zodiac we use today, those familiar signs of Aries, Taurus, Gemini, are descendants of Babylon's careful watch. When the Greeks adopted their names and adjusted their myths, they inherited not just stories, but a culture of quiet observation. Even now, modern astronomers still marvel at how precise Babylonian measurements were. They knew the length of the lunar month within seconds of today's best clocks. Their calm patience echoes in our most advanced observatories. And in every quiet gaze upward, we hear a soft whisper from Babylon. 7. Closing reflections. So tonight,
As you lie beneath your own ceiling of stars, know that you are part of an ancient lineage, a chain of stargazers, dreamers, scribes. Know that long before apps and charts and horoscopes, there were hands shaping clay under candlelight, eyes watching Venus rise and fall night after night, and hearts that found meaning not in chaos, but in cadence. Let that rhythm lull you now. Let the stars sing slowly to your soul as they once did in Babylon.
Chapter 2. Egyptian Deacons, Timekeepers of the Night. Now, we leave behind the banks of the Euphrates and drift gently westward across sands and time to a land where the stars were not only watched, but worshipped. Welcome to Kemet, the Black Land, ancient Egypt. 1. The Star That Woke the Nile. In Egypt, time was water, not clocks, not gears, but the flood of the Nile, the soft, inevitable rhythm of a river swelling and retreating with each passing year. And so, when the people of Egypt looked upward, they did not simply see stars, they saw warnings, promises, and the very heartbeat of their world. At the center of this celestial awareness stood one radiant star, Sobdet, known to the Greeks as Sirius. Each year, just before sunrise, Sirius would reappear in the eastern sky after weeks of invisibility. Its return was called the Heliacal Rising, and it came like a whisper before dawn. When this moment arrived, the priests would nod to one another. They would inform the pharaoh, and they would prepare. Because the rising of Sirius meant the floodwaters were on their way. Life would return to dry land. It was not superstition, it was certainty. The star was the flood was the year, and the year was everything. 2. The Deacons, a calendar of the cosmos. To track these changes, Egyptian astronomer priests used a celestial system both elegant and mysterious. The Deacons. There were 36 deacons in total, star groups or single stars that rose consecutively, roughly every 10 days, just before dawn. Each deacon marked a subdivision of the 360-day Egyptian year. 3 deacons per month, 10 days each, and together a cosmic calendar unfolded. These weren't dramatic constellations with roaring beasts or clashing gods. The deacons were more subtle. Sometimes they were bright stars in the belt of Orion. Other times they were barely visible specks. But to the trained eye of the temple priest, each was known. Each was loved. 3. night watches in the temples. Imagine now an Egyptian temple long after sunset. The stone is cool, the papyrus torches flicker, and at the top of the temple stairway stands a lone observer, wrapped in linen, charting the stars. This observer was called a horologion, a timekeeper of the night. With a simple instrument, a sighting tool or palm leaf pointer, they traced the decans rising one after another. Each rising marked a watch of the night. There were 12 hours of darkness in the Egyptian day, and each hour was ruled by a decan. As the hours passed, so did the stars. Slow, faithful, luminous markers. In temple walls, these hour stars were painted in rows, each with a female figure above, sometimes holding stars or glyphs. The heavens had become a clock, not of seconds, but of serenity. 4. Star clocks for the departed. The deacons served more than timekeeping. They were also guardians of the dead. In royal tombs, particularly those of the New Kingdom, were found charts known as star clocks. These were painted on coffin lids or carved into tomb ceilings. They showed which deacon would rise at what hour of the night, on which date, at which latitude. Why? Because in the Egyptian view of the afterlife, time continued. The soul of the departed needed to navigate the duat, the underworld, not in terror, but in rhythm. With the right stars as guides, the soul would be gently led through night, through judgment, and into eternal rebirth. The deacons were lanterns in that endless corridor of darkness. Familiar, reliable. They were the stars one had known in life, now leading the way beyond it. 5. Gods of light and shadow. Each deacon, though subtle, was tied to divine forces. In the temples of Karnak and Dendera, you find images of deacons as deities, sometimes human-like, sometimes abstract, each floating above boats or standing atop serpents. They were manifestations of the solar cycle, extensions of Ra, the sun god, whose journey through night was chronicled hour by hour. In some texts, each deacon governed a specific netherworld gate. The sun would pass through these gates nightly, accompanied by guardian spirits. But these weren't gates of trial or fire. They were doors in the sky, curtains pulled slowly back. To know the deacons was to know the journey of the sun and to walk with the gods. 6. The Temple of Hathor and the Celestial Cow. High above the sandstone pillars of the Temple of Dendera, there remains one of the most captivating star maps in Egypt. It is circular, delicately carved, filled with figures of gods, animals, and stars. At its heart, the goddess Nut, arched protectively over the earth, her body studded with stars. Nut is the sky itself. Each night she swallows the sun, and each morning she births it again. The deacons march across her form in arcs, time not in numbers, but in divine breath. Beneath her, priests and devotees stood in the cool shade of carved stone, whispering prayers, reading the skies, and perhaps in the soft hush of evening they felt time slow, not as pressure, but as presence. 7. Healing, dreams, and celestial medicine. Egyptian temples weren't only places of worship, they were also places of rest and healing. Some temples, such as those dedicated to Imhotep or Serapis, offered sanctuary to those seeking dreams. Here,
Chapter 3. Greek and Anatolian Overlap, the Absorbed Sky. As we drift further along the celestial river of ancient thought, we approach the lands where myth and sky were braided together into living memory. Welcome to Ionia, to Lydia, to the threshold of Hellenic stargazing, where Anatolian echoes and Greek clarity mingled beneath the same stars. 1. A sky shared between lands. In the lands we now call Western Turkey and Eastern Greece, the ancient Anatolians once gazed skyward, not with charts, but with quiet reverence. Before Greek philosophy gave names to stars, before the grandeur of Olympian myth crowned constellations, there were subtler stories, woven with harvests, winds, and ancestral voices. The Luvians, the Hittites, the Phrygians, their star knowledge was not etched in marble, but whispered in prayer. What little survives suggests a deep link between heaven and the natural world. By the 8th century BCE, Ionian ports brought Greek sailors face to face with this Anatolian sky. What followed was not conquest, but quiet absorption. The forgotten constellations. Among the most intriguing relics of this merging is the faded constellation once known as the Helmet of Mithras. Not the later Roman god, but an older warrior figure, possibly Anatolian or Persian in origin. The helmet, now erased from modern charts, was said to crown the late spring sky near what we now call Boötes and Hercules. To Anatolian tribes, this formation may have marked seasonal winds or a time for goat herding. The Greeks folded it gently into their myths, perhaps shaping the headgear of Perseus or associating it with a forgotten hero. The helmet stars remain, silent and unnamed, like musical notes missing from a song, still present but unheard. 3. Of philosophers and priests. Where Babylon's priests observed and Egypt's temples revered, the Greeks questioned. Yet in the early centuries, before Plato and Aristotle,
Greek stargazing had much in common with its Anatolian neighbors. Shrines in Miletus, Didymo, and Ephesus oriented not only to the sun but to specific stellar risings. A temple to Artemis may have been aligned with the rising of Arcturus, not for mathematical accuracy, but for spiritual alignment. The philosopher Thales of Miletus, often called the first scientist, was said to have predicted a solar eclipse, but perhaps it was not prediction, but remembrance, a tradition inherited from Babylon or Hatti, retold through a Greek tongue.
4. The naming of the Zodiac. Around the 5th century BCE, Greek thinkers began to shape a more formalized celestial language. Where Anatolian traditions were lived, Greek thought began to catalog. The Babylonians' 18 zodiacal constellations were trimmed to 12, streamlined for mathematical symmetry and narrative flow. Each constellation took on a dramatic Greek myth. Leo, the Nemean lion, slain by Heracles. Scorpius, the scorpion that killed Orion. Sagittarius, reimagined as a centaur archer, possibly echoing older Sumerian deities of the hunt. Yet these stories, rich as they are, layered over older truths. The shapes of the stars had not changed, only the stories we whispered into them. 5. Anatolian echoes in Greek myth. Certain Greek constellations still carry the breath of Anatolia. The Pleiades, for instance, a soft cluster of stars near Taurus, are spoken of in nearly every culture. To the Greeks, they were 7 sisters pursued by Orion, but to Anatolian farmers, they may have been beacons, markers of seasonal transition. And the star Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, was likely venerated in Lydian sky lore as a herald of spring. When viewed through a meditative lens, these stars are not trophies of empire. They are shared memories, retold across languages. 6. Slow merging of night beliefs. As Greek power grew and Anatolian kingdoms waned, the constellations of the old highlands faded quietly, but not violently. Instead, their meanings were often folded into Greek forms. The way a slow tide smooths the shoreline, the stories changed without erasure. Stone calendars once used in Hattusa may have guided the alignments of later Greek temples. Sky gods of Anatolia, storm bearers and moon riders, became epitaphs of Zeus, Apollo, Artemis. One belief dissolving into another, a peaceful coalescence of thought under a shared sky. 7. The calm of the Stoic sky. In later centuries, Greek philosophers such as Zeno, founder of Stoicism, returned to the heavens, not with myth, but with awe. The stars, he wrote, were not gods themselves, but signs of the divine order. They moved not in chaos, but in harmony with the Logos, the universal reason. Stoics taught that to align oneself with the stars was not superstition, but wisdom. To follow their calm circular dance was to find peace in one's soul. 8.
final reflections. So now, as the Anatolian hills sink beneath the horizon of thought, we remember that some of the oldest sky myths were never shouted. They were murmured, in hearth circles, in sheepfolds, in temples built with soft hands and strong hearts. And though we know not all their names, we still see their stars, still watching, still waiting, still glowing above us.
Chapter 4. Celtic Sky Songs. The Stars Between Trees. Now we cross seas once more, to misty isles and emerald valleys, where the night sky was known not through stone temples, but through song, trees, and the rhythm of land and sky in harmony. 1. A sky without charts. The ancient Celts, stretching from Ireland to Gaul, did not leave behind celestial diagrams, no star maps, no ziggurats, no planetary records, and yet their skies were deeply felt. Their calendar, nature-based and lunar-aligned, revolved around two halves of the year, light and dark. Their months followed lunar cycles, and their rituals were tuned to equinoxes, solstices, and star patterns they never named in the Greek or Roman sense. They knew the stars by how they moved among the trees. 2. The Ogham and the tree Zodiac. The Ogham script, used from roughly the 4th century onward, wasn't just an alphabet. It was a secret, whispering system of trees and meanings. Later Druidic revival traditions, especially in the 20th century, speculated on a tree zodiac, where each tree governed a segment of the lunar year. Birch at winter's rebirth, willow near the wet season, oak from midsummer, hazel as wisdom's harvest, yew in the time of ancestors. Though historical accuracy is debated, the spirit is clear. The Celts saw stars mirrored in forests. One could track the sky by walking the earth. 3. Herbalists and seers and the star-watched harvest. Druidic herbalists and seers observed not only the seasons, but which stars rose at night. A healer might wait for the first heliacal rising of Vega to begin cutting meadowsweet, or gather herbs during full moons under Arcturus, when spirits were said to roam thinly between worlds. There was no rush, no precision in hours, only patience. The stars told them when the world was ready. 4. The Singing Sky. Celtic bards composed chants and runes aligned with lunar nights and star patterns. Some verses suggest alignments with the 7 stars, likely the Pleiades or Ursa Major. These clusters guided navigation, farming, and spiritual gatherings. Their constellations were likely fluid, shaped by cultural memory. The Great Bear may not have been a bear, but a plow, a chariot, or 7 spears. To the Celts, the sky was not fixed. It was lived and sung. 5. The Morrigan and the Moon. The Morrigan, goddess of prophecy, war, and sovereignty, was linked to the waning moon and the dark stars that rose before Samhain, the Celtic New Year. In her domain, the stars whispered warnings, but even she was not a terror. She was balance, and the stars in her sky were thresholds, not threats.
Celtic sky lore, even in its most mysterious aspects, remains grounded, soothing, wrapped in fog, and tuned to silence. 6. Stone circles and stargates. Though not exclusive to Celts, stone circles like those at Callanish and Newgrange reveal careful alignments with solstices, lunar standstills, and bright stars such as Deneb and Vega. To lie beneath these stones was to feel anchored to the sky, not in control of it, but in harmony with it. One needn't name a star to know its touch. 7. Closing the circle. As you now lie in stillness, listening, perhaps you can imagine the rustle of branches overhead. Imagine ancient hands reaching skyward, not with answers, but with gratitude. The Celtic sky was a partner, a reflection, a poem written in dew and dusk. And though much has faded, the songs remain, in birdsong, in rivers, in the hush between heartbeats.
Chapter 5. Reflection. Celestial silence across cultures. Now we return, not to a single land, but to the thread that ties them all. A universal language, from Babylon to Egypt, from Greece to misted isles, the night sky has spoken softly. Not in commands, not in chaos, but in cadence. No matter the continent, the first calendars were of light and dark. The first temples were aligned not with borders, but with sunrise and starfall. The stars did not divide us, they unified us. Meaning without mastery. In modern times, we speak of mastering space, sending ships, naming planets, photographing galaxies. But the ancients did not seek to conquer the sky. They sought to listen, to know when to plant, when to wait, when to sing, when to sleep. The Zodiac as memory. The 12 zodiac signs, Aries to Pisces, carry echoes of older skies. Each name, each symbol is a palimpsest. Beneath Greek heroes lie Babylonian farmers, Egyptian priests, Anatolian shepherds, Celtic dreamers. The zodiac is not truth, it is memory, layered, shifting, still shining. Let the stars be gentle. As this journey nears an end, take a moment to let go of time. Let your breath match the orbit of stars. Let your thoughts drift like clouds across constellations. Let the silence of ancient watchers fill your chest. And know, always know, that you are part of the same sky, the same rhythm, the same lullaby. Fading voice. Sleep now, beneath the stars that watched Babylon. Dream under the constellations that crowned pharaohs. Rest where druids wandered and philosophers pondered. And remember, they're still watching,
They're still waiting, and they shine only for you.